guys, I wanted to do a video comparing the Panasonic G85 with the Panasonic LX100. Now these cameras are not really competitors to each other, but rather they complement each other, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. Now maybe you have the G85 but you're thinking about a smaller one lens travel camera like the LX100, or maybe you have the LX100 but you're interested in maybe getting your first 4/3 system camera like the G85 or an Olympus. I'm going to talk about the second scenario because that's what I did. I bought this partly because I really wanted a camera that could do 4K video, and partly because I was interested in the idea of a small travel camera that still had full enthusiast controls, a relatively large sensor, and a fast lens. And even now, I mean, what has it been? It's been over 2 years since the LX100 came out. There's still not a compact camera with a better sensor size and lens aperture ratio than the LX100. You're getting a micro 4/3 sensor and a 24-75 equivalent f1.7 to 2.8 lens. Now that is a very fast lens, especially when you consider how small they made it. Now in terms of build quality, the LX100 is metal top and bottom, front and back, sides, the controls, the lens, it's all metal and it feels great. But it's not weather sealed, and the metal on it, it's just a metal skin. It's not like a magnesium frame like you'd have on the GH4. So in terms of actually taking a beating, I would wager the G85 would actually be the tougher camera. Now the G85 is weather sealed and it is mostly plastic, but the front panel and the bottom of the camera are metal. In terms of size, of course, the LX100 is smaller and lighter. The G85 though has a fantastic deep grip and balances well with the lenses I've used on it. Now the control philosophy on these cameras is very different. The LX100 has traditional shutter speed and aperture controls on the camera and the lens itself, and the G85 has kind of a more modern PASM interface with a mode dial up top and a set of control rings, one around the shutter and one on the back for your main settings like aperture and shutter speed. You can control them both at the same time. Now I really like the approach on the G85 for video, but I like the approach on the LX100 for stills. And the reason is it seems to be quicker to get your shutter speed and your video controls set on the G85. It's less knob twirling, I think, than getting the 1/50th of a second and all that on the LX100. So overall I kind of call it a wash. I can't really pick a favorite here. Now in terms of image quality, they're probably more similar than they are different. You do get better resolution with the G85. You get 16 megapixels versus 12. Both of them, I mean, here's the G85 with its kit lens, the 12-60, and the LX100 with its only lens. They're both good sharp lenses, especially if you stop down just a little bit, like maybe a stop, you'll get nice sharp corners. The speed of the lens, of course, is fantastic on the LX100, but the image stabilization on the G85 is so much better, especially in video. I put a video on my channel that shows me walking around my apartment holding both cameras, and you can see how much smoother the G85 is. I'd say overall in image quality, the G85 is probably about half a stop better. It's a little bit sharper at the pixel level, there's a little bit less noise, the shadows are a little bit cleaner, but if you're upgrading from the LX100 and you're expecting, you know, much better image quality, the G85 is probably not going to be what you want. You might want to be looking at the GH5 or the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II. You have to have deep pockets for those cameras, but if you want a real step change in terms of image quality, that's probably the only way to go right now. Now let's talk about displays. The EVF on the LX100 is actually what's called a field sequential display, meaning it shows red, green, and blue pixels simultaneously. The G85 uses a standard OLED display. So the G85's OLED display is easier on the eyes. You don't get this kind of rainbow jagged effect when you're panning like you do with the LX100. So the G85 does have the larger and more comfortable viewfinder. The resolution though is actually higher technically on the LX100's viewfinder. It has a 1280 by 720, essentially 720p viewfinder. The G85 has an XGA, a 1024 by 768 viewfinder. But because this is only displaying one color at a time, I don't know, it kind of tricks your eyes to thinking it's sharper than it is. Whereas this on the G85 is just a more comfortable viewfinder. Now the back LCDs, they're both pretty similar in terms of image quality. They're both bonded to the glass. You get a nice, crisp, contrasty image. The resolution on this is VGA 640 by 480, and this is 720 by 480. So this is actually a, oh gosh, this is a 3 by 2 LCD, and this is a 4 by 3, I believe. So the aspect ratio is different. And that brings me to another point with the LX100, and another knock against it, I think, is the fact that it does not have a tilting LCD. And when you're looking for a travel camera, it's kind of annoying sometimes to have to hold the camera up and you can't really see what you're shooting. Whereas this thing, you can flip it out and flip it around any kind of way you want, and you're fine. So you don't get a flipping screen on this. I think they did that mainly to save cost, because nowadays you can make it so that it does not take up that much space. I mean, the viewfinder sticks out more than the screen would if they had made it flipping, so kind of a moot point there. But yeah, I mean, overall, the result is pretty much like you would expect. The LX100 is nice, but if you find yourself using it and really enjoying it, you're going to reach a point like I did where you feel limited. You feel like, well, I'd like to have other lenses on it. I'd like to have, a little bit more flexibility, a bigger grip, a little bit more spaced out controls, because the buttons on this thing, they're pretty close together, and especially this control ring here, I'm not a fan. Anytime they put a ring around a 4-way controller, it's just kind of fiddly in my opinion. On the G85 you get a separate 4-way controller and a separate knob here and then up front. So I mean, like I said, it's about like you'd expect. In terms of image quality, the G85 is a little bit better, but it's not a huge, massive bit better. What is a massive improvement, though, in terms of image quality has got to be that stabilization. The fact that the body and the lenses can work together with stabilization is a major point towards the G85, and something that I think really distinguishes it amongst its competition as well. So I hope this was helpful. I mean, it's kind of an oranges and apples comparison, but I think I did a decent job of highlighting the differences between these in terms of using them and the image quality. Check out my other video comparing the video quality and the stabilization. That really highlights the advantage of the G85 for video. So with that in mind, I would kind of caution against buying the LX100 just to have something that does 4K, because you might be a little bit put off by the stabilization in video, whereas if you spend a little bit more money on the G85 or even the GX80, which is cheaper but also has dual IS, you might be better served. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Oh yeah, and battery life. That's something that surprised me about the LX100 when I took it to the Grand Canyon. I brought 2 charged batteries with me. I took some night time lapses and lots of video, and somehow, amazingly, after the whole trip, I only used half of one battery. So I'm trying to think what I did. I think I turned the screen brightness down a notch, and I set the viewfinder and EVF refresh rate to 30 frames per second instead of 60. So that might have saved a little bit of juice. But the battery life was pretty good, and the G85, it's a little bit better, but I mean, they're both pretty good, I guess is what I'm saying. If you're doing a full day's shoot and you're doing a lot of really heavy video, I'd recommend picking up an extra battery for the camera.